So, hi everyone, this is Nina from E27. Thank you for being here. Before we start, let me bring up a few housekeeping announcements. All right, so first, this webinar is recorded and a copy will be available after the event. Second, please type your content questions at the Q&A widget at any point during the discussion. We will do our best to answer your questions during the Q&A segment. Okay, and third, feel free to use the chat widget. Some have already used that earlier to post your technical or admin questions or to simply interact with us during the discussion. We would love to hear from you. And finally, do join the polling session when there is a live poll. In fact, we have three today. So we would like to make this an engaging experience for all of you. And your answers will help drive certain parts of the conversation. All right, so now that housekeeping is done, let's talk about why we are here. Okay, so by now we all know how COVID-19 has impacted our lives, our healthcare, our businesses, and exposed our vulnerabilities and preparedness. In short, we are fragile. So today we have invited three guests who are coming from different expertise and vantage points to discuss strategies for building business resilience. So before we get there, allow me to share our discussion points for today. So firstly, we'll talk about how businesses responded and adapted to the disruption. Second, we will take a look at how cash flow management and data visibility are crucial to business operations, especially in this challenging time. And finally, we'll take a look at how digital transformation is a game changer. Okay, so before we go to the opening remarks, we're launching the first poll. So as I mentioned, we have three. So here's the first one. Vinci will help me launch it. All right, there you go. So you should be able to see it on your screen. It's just a couple of questions. And we'll give you time to answer that as I introduce our first guest, Peter Queck. Yeah, so please feel free to select your answer from the two questions. Okay, so all right, so Peter is the general manager of Oracle NetSuite in Southeast Asia, and he is responsible for building and leading the organization across the region. In this role, Peter is charged with overall strategy and plans for new partnerships with customers and channel partners to deliver results and build fundamentals for sustainable long-term business growth. So hi, Peter, welcome.
Hi,
Working
Nina.
from home, I see.
Yes. Hi.
Yes. All right. So I think we can already, let's wait a little bit more, for people to answer our poll. But Peter, yes, please go ahead, introduce yourself a little bit more and what NetSuite has been doing.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Great to be here. I hope everybody is doing well today and looking after yourself. We're still in the midst of the pandemic, and please look after yourself. I have been with Oracle NetSuite for 3 years plus now, and I've been in the industry for more than 25 years with the various major IT companies. This is a really uncertain times and unusual times for the matter. And I think everybody is struggling to try to understand where do we go from here. All right. And while the poll results is coming up, I think there's a lot of stuff that is going on in the landscape that we are in whether it's startup, small medium enterprises, or even the large corporate companies. I think one thing that's for sure, when the results come out, we will probably see some interesting commonalities as well. I would also want to maybe take this time to quickly go through a few things about Oracle NetSuite. Oh, here you go. The results are out, and I think this is really good to see. No surprises there. Fundraising, which is in a way related to managing cash flow, which you see in the second questions there. I think these are stuff that really resonate very well. Right. Let me just kind of quickly go through and share with you a little bit about Oracle NetSuite. Next slide, please. We are a company that's been around for 22 years already. First cloud company. That vision was actually, from a gentleman way back then, Evan Gobert, who actually said that, look, I think Oracle, and he was with Oracle back then, he thinks that there are a lot of things that we can do to help startup companies, SMEs, to solve some of the problems that they are facing. The silos of data that is existing, the spreadsheet and all these, manual process that's going on that needs to be seen on in a system that is able to have them make a quick decision. So from there, out came Evan Gilbert started his company called NetLedger at first, and then eventually grown to a huge company which Oracle acquired way back about 4 years ago for $9.5 billion. Today, we have 22,000 customers, unique customers using our system across 215 companies. Record growth year on year in the last 3 years, ever since Oracle acquired NetSuite. And it's amazing to see that in the last 12 months alone, we have almost close to 5,000 new customers who actually came on board. And the next slide will show you the various industries that we are in, from software services to advertising, media and publishing, all the way to product-related companies, manufacturing, wholesale, distribution, and retail. Right in the middle is really why we also do some things to help the community in the form of non-profit organization. You will see some very familiar names over here globally. I want to share with you a next slide, which is actually more about the customers in this part of the world. So we have selected some ASEAN customers, which I think you will also be very familiar with. From the left side, you see companies like vSense, Advanced AI, e-commerce, all right, Green Packet in Malaysia, Beam in Singapore, all the way through to the right-hand side, we have Pomelo, Four Fingers, Food Chain, and so on. So it's amazing to see a lot of the companies in this part of the world coming on board as NetSuite customers and have really doing a lot of good things for these customers as well. I want to really pick two customers in the next slide that really responded to the COVID challenge really early on. And they really did wonderful things. Take, for example, Pomelo donated more than 40,000 surgical masks about 4 months ago to the Thailand Red Cross, doing great stuff for the community. On the right-hand side, you see a Philippines-based customer by the name of Dragon Edge. This is a company that do with sunblocks, right? And what they have done was that they created a limited edition of the disinfecting spray within 11 days when COVID hit, and they actually took only 11 days to actually develop and produce the product when it would have actually taken them 3 months. And all that, they did it in the confine of working from home, working and not going to meet each other. So it's just amazing that in spite of these challenges, they rise to the occasion, they responded very well, and they actually did wonderful things, donating to the community, the products, and really helping the cause. Right, so it's really amazing, and really thank all these customers. I'm sure there are a lot more out there who actually help in this pandemic period. All right, I'll be back to you, Nina.
All right, thank you so much, Peter. And I think it's all about staying connected and relevant. And you mentioned that also earlier in our discussion. So we look forward to connecting this with our topic. All right. So now, before we introduce the rest of the panelists, we already have our poll number 1. So let me just ask Vinci to launch our second poll. Yeah, as it's only 3 questions. All right, there you go. So let me just give you that time to answer as I introduce the rest of our panelists. So earlier, you've already met Peter. Now let me introduce our second panelist, Adi Vaidia of Duolingo. Now, Adi is one of the founding members and started as the head of expansion at Duolingo. Under his leadership, he initiated and helped grow the Indonesia business to be one of the largest fashion marketplaces in Southeast Asia today. And of course, in 2017, he has held the position of Chief Operating Officer. Hello, Adi, and thanks for being here.
Hi, Nina. Hi, Peter, Paulo, and all the people listening to us here today. Pleasure being here.
Yeah, and I'm sure you have a lot to share with us later on. And finally, we have Paulo Limcauco, who is the Southeast Asia Investment Officer of Action Venture Lab. Paulo leads all aspects of Venture Lab's investment efforts in the region, including pipeline generation, portfolio management, and network development. Paulo's role spans emerging market venture investing, management, and entrepreneurship, with a focus on cutting-edge innovation and financial inclusion. And hi, Paulo. I know you have a lot of things to say about Action. How are you today?
Hi, Nina. Apologies for the slight delay there.
No worries, no worries.
So yes, thanks, Nina, for the invitation. Great to be here with my fellow panelists, Peter and Adi. It's great to be speaking with all of you. So I believe we could go to the. So yeah, we have some quick slides on Action. Will we do that now?
Yeah.
Okay, so just quickly, wanted to quickly introduce Action Venture Lab to our attendees of this webinar. Thank you again for joining. It's great to be here this afternoon. So Action Venture Lab, it's a global fund that invests in fintechs for financial inclusion. We invest in innovative fintechs that find ways and tries to solve these and addresses the issues of financial inclusion globally. We invest in early stage fintechs that we find that are scalable and can do a lot of good in terms of really helping the markets that we care about. There remains, especially now during the crisis, there remains a strong impact need, and we're seeing more and more of that. And at the same time, we see that there's a growing opportunity, right? Now to really tackle that funding gap. So technology continues to advance, and at the same time, financial products and services continue to be developed that we can continue to expand to those that are underserved and underbanked. The next slide, we want to show a quick snapshot of our investing companies all across the globe. So we've invested in 47 since 2012. So as you can see, we're in most emerging markets, LATAM, India, Africa. We have some investments in the US and also here in Southeast Asia. So as mentioned by Nina, I lead the work in the region, and we're really looking to expand our activities here. We have 3 active portfolio organizations in Southeast Asia, FinTech Advance and First Circle, and for speaking more about our experience here. But yes, hope this is a quick intro for Venture Lab, and looking forward to speaking with everyone later on.
Yeah, and of course, later on, we'll be getting your perspective from a VC on what we are going to be talking about. Yeah, so we'll be moving on quickly to the first section, which is about, so we already know that the pandemic has affected businesses. So I think what our audience is curious to know is that how did the businesses adapt and respond to this disruption? And I think I want to throw the first question to Adi. I know Zelingo has gone through a lot. So how did you, adapt and respond to that disruption? What were your immediate action points? We'll talk about this from the customer-facing and business-facing aspect.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Ina. So I think unlike some of the other businesses, we are a fashion-focused B2B marketplace, B2B commerce supply chain company. And unfortunately for us, as COVID hit, fashion was one of those categories which was not really an essential. And of course, the supply chain really came to a halt for the things that we were doing. The first thing that we really did, and sort of just focusing on the action point more than the problem here, the first thing that we really did was look around and see what our current set of manufacturers and suppliers are actually capable of doing, which will help them support their business in the near future. So as an example, we have a bunch of lingerie manufacturers with us in Sri Lanka. And if you're familiar with the supply chain here, lingerie manufacturing is actually one of the best suited to create masks. So we actually helped bring some level of intelligence into those factories with what we were seeing in the market sort of in the early days of COVID. And when business started dropping with some of these guys, we told them that, hey, you know what, it's probably best for you to stay agile. And at this point in time, move towards producing some of the PPE equipment and protective gear. At the same time, beauty manufacturers, for example, are really well suited to produce hand sanitizers. And that is sort of the agility that we brought into the category mix there on the beauty side as well. So I think the first most important thing was to stay agile enough when the tough time came. And when you knew that some of the stuff that you're producing is probably not the most essential one, what can you do to make sure that business sustains? So that was number one. And internally, I would say the most important thing that really we did as a business, and probably the change in mindset as well, was bringing cash flow management to the fore of decision making, really, because cash flow management has always, of course, been an important pillar for us to manage the business. But it's one of those pillars that sometimes gets left behind in the entire race for P&Ls and top lines, etc. But I think what really the COVID scenario taught us, that from doing periodic reviews in the early days of when COVID hit, we were literally doing daily reviews on cash flow management and ensuring that particular piece really becomes the center focus for us to make any kind of decision making. And we're proud to say now that I think it is probably the most important financial statement that we are looking at and helping us drive through this difficult time.
Thanks, Adi. Yeah, we'll go through that. You mentioned cash flow. We'll take a look into that more as we go to the next section. But for now, Paulo, let me ask you, for your portfolio of businesses, what were the immediate actions that you saw them take as they adapted and responded to the challenges?
Thanks, Nina. Yes, I mean, definitely, our portfolio companies were definitely forced to adapt, and as they were greatly disrupted, right? As a fintech-focused fund, as you can imagine, a lot of our companies are in the lending side, right? A lot of them are in the provision of financial products and services. So with the loan moratoriums, with the quarantines, a lot of them were greatly disrupted, right? So there's a lot of things that they needed to do. I'd have to say that maybe there are two action points that we saw that really worked well in terms of how they really responded to this very difficult time, that operating period that they were looking at, right? So I think the first is really and Adi alluded to this a little bit, is really evaluating the state of their business from a continuity standpoint. Right now, more than ever, as Adi mentioned, it was important to really understand what assets you have, especially on the cash side, right? And also really understand what that means for your runway and how long that will get you, right? And if there's needs to adjust that, whether it's reduction of OPEX, right? Really trying to increase runway as much as possible. So the first thing that they really needed to do was evaluate their business in terms of a continuity standpoint, just given the circumstances that we were in. The second was really evaluate the business from with regards to like a product market fit, right? With regards to if it's still a product that's relevant to this market, if it's still being distributed in a way that works for given the current conditions, right? So really understanding how that works, and if there's a need to pivot, if there's a need to change, if the customer acquisition strategies that I mean, a lot of our businesses were digital, but some of them still had that physical aspect, right? Whether it's on collection, so there's some need to have some real thought in terms of what are they going to do with all these quarantines and social distancing measures, right? So really evaluating that product market fit and how they can continue to successfully engage with their customers. So taking these two, a number of the things that we saw them do, and I think was very helpful for them, is again, a lot of them initially scaled back operations and really evaluated what was happening in their business. A lot of them started to actively engage with their customers, which I think was very helpful in terms of making sure that, especially as a lender, you want to be able to make sure that that your borrower knows that you're there for them and that you're willing to support them through this difficult time. They continue to evaluate and look to conserve cash flow, and also, of course, they actively spoke to their partners, such as their equity shareholders and investors and debt funders, right? So we were constantly in communication with all our startups in terms of what's going on, how we can help, and where they were at, right? And also, I guess the last thing is, after understanding the state of your business, try to develop, I guess, a short-term outlook given the crisis, right? And putting things in place. So I think those are some of the things that help our startups get through this very difficult and challenging business time.
Thanks, Paulo. And I think it ties back also to what Peter said earlier about staying connected. Even with the social distancing in place, you're staying connected, even over communicating online and going digital as we speak. So Peter, the same question for your, earlier you showed us these variety of businesses you work with. How did they adapt and respond to the disruption as well? And some of the things you can share to our audiences as well.
Sure. So obviously, when this pandemic hit, the immediate challenges were really about the safety of the employees, and yet making sure that the operations is not impacted, right? Now, and customers continue to be able to engage with you as either a service provider or a producer of goods. So I had a privilege of talking to one of the CIO customer, and this company is Unistar, who is based out of the Philippines as well. They provide credit and loans to SMEs, So they invested in NetSuite almost 4 years ago. And guess what? When the pandemic hit, immediately they were told to work from home. They had to shut down about hundreds of their outlets across the Philippines. And guess what? The CIO was very thankful because they will still be able operating as usual. They were operating as usual, not even need to go to the office, be able to process loans, be able to process payments, etc., and ensuring that cash flow was still kept at the level that they are comfortable with. So I think this is really an amazing thing that they were very thankful for the decision they made 4 years ago. Now really are reaping a lot of benefits for them, and not only them, but for their customers as well. So their lenders. So this is really about having that vision, starting out and making a decision that you never know can actually bring you a lot of benefits in time to come. So even having said that, in this pandemic, we still have a lot of customers have chosen NetSuite as the cloud ERP, and for us to be able to go and implement that remotely. That's the amazing thing about cloud ERP, without having us to be on site and then able to get them quickly go live so that they can actually see the benefits of this system.
Thanks, Peter. And I think like the transition made it easier for those who suddenly had to find themselves working remotely. Yeah, which brings us actually to the next part of our discussion. You already touched on, like data visibility, and earlier we ran a poll, which we will be pulling up now to share the results. The second poll. Yeah, so we asked our audience what they, how they see data visibility, and I think we see that many of them believe it's very important. But then there are also some that are still relying on spreadsheets at the moment. And only a few, I think, also well, just okay. Some say it's just okay, and maybe like a handful would say it's highly visible at the moment. So Peter, to continue with what you were discussing earlier, and maybe to ask you a question, like what does it have to do with business continuity when we talk about data visibility, and why should businesses, even at this point, be mindful of this?
This is a great one. This is really more important now than ever when you're able to make sense of data that you have. All right, with a cloud ERP solution from NetSuite and so on, you literally have a lot of data points in your hands. Right, you can actually be asking yourself questions and then be able to kind of forecast what would the possibility if you were to do some scenarios, etc. Right, and we have this kind of solution as well as part of our portfolio. I think in this really uncertain market, amidst this global pandemic, businesses want to be more, to have more liquidity for sure, right? Cash flow to be able to pay salaries, basic bills, etc. And more than that, I think it's important for them to really be able to kind of like understand what does it mean if you were to let go unused facilities. Right now, everybody's working from home. What does that mean to your top line and bottom line, etc.? So those are the stuff that are now questions that big customers are asking ourselves, and thankfully we have got the solutions for them as well. And of course, the other area is, of course, working capital. Right, managing it is absolutely critical to ensure that your supply chain is not disrupted. I think we hear a lot of disruption, including supply chain. I think one part of the reason is because of this uncertainty that is introduced. Suppliers are becoming very cautious in terms of like the credit they're giving to businesses and so on. And I think it's important for us to keep in mind some of these things. Yes, cash flow is one component of it. There's a lot of other stuff surrounding that as well. You want to be able to make sure that you're managing your working capital as well. So those are the things that I think is very important as part of data visibility. Yeah.
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, and Adi, earlier you mentioned about cash flow management. Now, can you kind of expound on that as well for this part, and how having this real-time knowledge and visibility has helped you make those quick decisions right at the onset of the crisis. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. See, I think it's not a change that you can make overnight. And frankly, for our listeners and especially for any early stage founders on the stream today, I think you need to plan for it beforehand. So, and the planning needs to happen from two sides, right? One is the investment that you're going to make on the people side of things, and the second is the investment that you're going to make on the tools and sort of visibility products point of view. So we really invested early on a solid finance team across different countries that we work in, and we have operations in about 7 or 8 different countries. So ensuring that you're very sort of on top of all the regulations and taxes, etc., all of those things on a countrywide basis was critical. And the second piece, of course, was the tools that you're putting in place, because of course spreadsheets are great when you are early, in your early stage, but over time, things like account payables, account receivables, working capital management, etc., it becomes extremely complicated to manage those kind of things on a spreadsheet basis. And having things like we are a proud customer of Oracle NetSuite, so having products like those really do help make sure that you have that visibility that is extremely critical for you to over time make decisions in situations like what we are going through today, or any other kind of recession situation where, as I said earlier as well, cash flow sort of becomes the centerpiece of your decision making. And not for anyone else's fault, but of course your vendors and your customers would also want to hold on to cash. And that is when the P&L, which is probably showing a very beautiful picture, doesn't really translate into real cash flows. And having that visibility into APs and ARs becomes extremely necessary. So I think we were fortunate enough that we invested in these both people and tools early on, and were able to make the right decisions when really the bad times in that sense came.
Thanks, Adi. And I think this one is for Paulo, right? Now, for many, I think earlier during the poll, some of our like audience here, they are into fundraising at the moment. That's one of the things they're currently working on or focused on. Now, many have this misconception that just because you're fundraising, you're not supposed to be that focused so much also on data visibility. Now, from the standpoint of a VC, how is this critical or crucial even for those who are fundraising, especially when they're facing investors? And yeah, can you please expound on that as well?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I mean, I guess, to answer this question, I mean, even before the pandemic, right? I mean, data visibility has always been very important to investors, right? I mean, it's important for VCs to see, the KPIs as they evaluate potential investments, and then post investment, it's very important to be able to track the portfolios, right? So it's almost impossible for a VC to invest in a company that doesn't have proper data, or at least some level of visibility in terms of the KPIs that you're tracking and looking out for, right? So it's really quite important. But now, I guess, bringing it more to what we're facing now, right? So it's yeah, I mean, as my co-panelists have mentioned, it's even more important now, right? Because we would need to really understand the unit economics of the business, for example, and where they are in terms of the what their cash runway looks like, right? In terms of the number of the revenues compared to their operating costs, right? And what that looks like for monthly burn, right? So it's very important for as we evaluate companies that they have some idea of this, or at least have a good and a way to track it. You're right in saying that a lot of them initially are using Excel files, and we're seeing that and I guess it's a slow transition in terms of being able to update those softwares, which obviously we continue to push them to do. But yeah, I mean, generally, even if by tracking it through Excel, it's really just important to make sure that you have that understanding and knowledge of what that cash flow looks like. Then moving on to becoming a portfolio company, I mean, it's very important to continue to have that, just because we need the KPIs and the metrics and the dashboard to be able to track your progress, right? To be able to understand where you are compared to forecasts, where the business is compared to expectations, right? And if we're doing well or not, right? It's also a way for investors to have, I guess, an understanding of the business without being involved in the day-to-day, right? So I guess to put it more concretely, here at Venture Lab, we have regular touch points with our portfolio companies. We have quarterly board meetings, we have monthly investor calls, we have informal catch-ups, and all of these conversations revolve around some level of data, right? We're asking you how much you're making, and more recently, how much cash is left, right? And all of that, right? So it's really important. I mean, if it wasn't clear before, it is really crystal clear now in terms of being able to make sure that you have that on hand. So yeah, I mean, I think it's greatly important whether we're just looking for an investment or continuing to monitor a portfolio that our companies have a good level of data visibility and really know their KPIs quite well.
Thanks, Paulo. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, it makes a good first impression if they already know they have this understanding of their cash flow or data visibility right at the start. Yeah. Okay, so which brings us to, I think, like the final section, right? We talked about bringing it to our conversation, our topic, building resilience, right? And these days we hear how digital transformation is no longer just nice to have. It's already a necessity. And in fact, like even at E27, we've already like published several articles based on this one. So for Paulo, let me just go back to you. Like earlier we spoke of challenges. So now we ask the question, right? Where should businesses start? Because of all of these, we have all of these great advice. What parts of the business need to be changed? How do they even map out future scenarios? And how do they deal with their existing and new customers? So can we have your views on that?
Yeah, thanks, Lina. So yeah, I guess to answer this question, it's tough, right? I mean, we don't really know what's going to happen in the next few months. We don't really know how things will unfold. Whether we'll be out of this or not, or so there's really just so much uncertainty, right? So it's quite tough to really plan it out. But I guess as a start, one thing that I would say is that a good way to do this is for a business to really understand clearly and actually very honestly where it stands given the new economic reality, right? Be very honest on how the crisis has affected your business, whether good or bad, and really try to develop a plan to address this. Understand again if there's some changes on your product market fit, on where your customers stand, the challenges that they faced. Look into your unit economics, look into your customer acquisition, and see how the pandemic has really changed, and really try to understand where this leaves your business, right? Because given how different this world is, we're sure that there's some level of change that happened to your business, right? And most businesses were affected and have needed to pivot in one way or another. So again, it's difficult for me to say exactly where to start. But again, it will really be through looking at your business, and sometimes it could be major decisions or minor tweaks, right? So I guess again, to concretize this a little bit further, to look into our portfolio, we have a company in Africa that does microinsurance, and obviously they saw a surge in demand for their product, right? So what they did was they took interest in really producing new products, and especially that ones that were quite relevant in the market today, and finding ways to bundle it and finding ways to distribute it even more efficiently, right? So they really took what they saw from what was happening in the in their market, and really tried to make the business work for that, right? At the same time, as I mentioned earlier, a number of our business are SME lenders, right? A number of our startups are SME lenders. So so they had to do a more difficult pivot, right? In terms of really understanding, who to lend to, right? How to change their underwriting model, what type of industries to be look out for, right? So they had to pivot in a different way. So it's really trying to understand where your business is and how it's changed, how it's affected, and really trying to develop a plan, really developing a plan for that, right? And I guess just lastly, you mentioned on the scenario analysis, right? So when we in April, when everything started really getting bad all across the world, we worked with our companies to develop scenario analysis, right? A good, bad, and I guess ugly, right? So we worked with them, and as you can imagine, it's always changing, right? So but it's really important that you at least try to have that exercise to understand, where your business stands, and the effects that of what's happening around the world. So it's really having a clear and honest assessment of where your business is and mapping it out afterwards.
Yeah, thanks, Paulo. clear and honest. That can be very painful, but then very necessary these days. Peter, I think the same question goes to you, right? Where do businesses start? To answer the question that we have been teasing our audience as well, where do they start? How do they map out, their future scenario? So can you also share your insights on that, or maybe to add on to what Paolo has mentioned?
So I just going to add on to what Paolo mentioned. I think it's a lot depends on really, really what you are after and what you're looking at, right? I think in this current climate, I would say generally, but it's not necessarily across the board, right? You look at the part of the business which has got the, that you would like to see a major impact on in terms of, let's say, for example, finance, cash flow, working capital, etc. These are the stuff that you really, really want to really have a close eye on, because it is so important during this pandemic period. You also be asking yourselves about, in terms of your customer acquisition or retention strategy here. All right, it is very important not to forget that business still go on, even though it might be smaller, be reduced. I think you still want to be able to hold on to your top customers. It's so important, right? How do you continue to grow the business, keep connected with them so that they will value your relationship, right? And I think that's important to keep in mind. Look at other areas, and in terms of usage, adoption, you will probably find pockets of opportunities there. In spite of this pandemic, there are still some silver lining that there for you to say, hey, look, if I were to be able to address some of these things, potentially I can see that it's going to continue to grow this business when we are out of this pandemic. All right, and of course, last but not least, since cash flow is being talked about so much in this event, I think it's important to really review some of your metrics around outstanding accounts receivable, payment track record, etc. Going back to the basics, etc. Making sure that some of these you have got a system in place to be able to help you out, right?
Thanks, Peter. Yes, Ari, would you like to add anything to that one? Especially, I think, handling existing and new customers. How do you go about that as well?
Sure. So I think Peter and Paula, of course, added some valuable points here. But from a business point of view, I think one of the things that I would really advise everyone to be very careful about is, especially when they're moving towards building digital ways of looking at their business and incorporating digital tools. And this is something that I've seen with some of the younger companies, that they take a very different kind of tool to do their P&L management, and then a very, very different kind of tool to do their cash flow management. And then the problem is that there would probably be one person sitting in finance team somewhere who's the bridge between the two, and no one else really understands how the two are really connected. I think it's extremely critical when you're building this kind of digital infrastructure to start looking at your data, to make sure that these tools really talk to each other, because otherwise it's going to become a black box and very complicated. Because the whole idea of bringing in this digital transformation is to make it easier and not more complicated. So the 2 or the 3 different tools, whatever that you may implement for cash flow management, P&L management, data visualization, the line items really correspond to each other and somehow easy for everyone to sort of read. And in terms of advice really on new customers or old customers, etc., I would say one of the things that we really did, and a real case sort of example here, was that the recession never really hits you overnight, right? There are always signs and there are always signals that you start seeing that, hey, something is going to come now, which is probably going to push the economy towards a recession, right? And what we started doing pretty much earlier this year, because even though COVID was not really a huge reality by that at that time, we always knew that a recession is probably in the coming. So what we started really doing was bucketing all our customers, vendors, etc., into say green, yellow, and red sort of buckets, and then started to just sort of reduce exposure in any kind of exposure, whether it was a payable exposure, receivable exposure, over time, right? So it's not an overnight change that you need to make. So, for example, if you have a vendor that is supposed to pay you, but you know the payment track record has not been the best, you need to start focusing on that early on, or wherever you have a receivable to be received. You start focusing on that early, because I think those are the things that really build up to you then being ready for the challenge that is going to come over time. So I think being ready beforehand is extremely critical, and there are signals that would always precede any bad time that is to come. So you need to be, as everyone else mentioned, honest. If you're honest, you understand your business best, and you know what is the best thing for you to do at that point in time.
Thanks, Adi. And it's, what I take from you is that it's all about being ready even before something happens.
Absolutely.
Getting the tools ready. Yeah, okay. Thank you so much. I think we do have a lot of interesting questions coming in, and that makes us ready to open the floor for more Q&A, for a Q&A session from our audience. So I think we already have some here, but while we're also picking out these answers, right, let's try to launch like the final poll for today. We're going to take a look at that later on as well. Yeah, all right. So we'll give you time to answer that one, but for now I want to like ask, I think this one is for Peter. So the first one, Alpha asked earlier about, you know, like how you dealt with the budget challenges of businesses. In terms of course, of what's happening now. How did you position your offering? Because I think that's also the struggle for many. Like we talked about, you know, like being on a lean budget and trimming away the fat and all that. So did anything change from NetSuite's perspective and pricing and offering? Yeah.
Yeah. So thanks for that question, Alpha. I think the quick answer is that we don't change anything, you know, during this pandemic in terms of the pricing strategy. It's more about, you know, making sure that our customers during this period of time, prospects during the period of time, really are looking at something that is probably a lot more affordable, something that is probably not as risky in terms of having to invest a big sum of money into a system, and this is how we work with them. All right, we want to understand a bit more about the growth plan. They want to understand a little bit about what is critical for them in the first initial phase of this project. What do they want to see? I think that is where we are coming from, right? And I think this is actually more important on our part now to be able to understand our customers even more during this pandemic period. Yep.
So it's really about working hand in hand and more closely with your clients and even potential clients, understanding where they are in their business journey.
Exactly.
All right. Thank you, Peter. And I think this one, all right, so how does the pandemic affect? So we've been talking about the fintech space from Paulo, and of course from Adi, your vertical, but how does the pandemic affect the other industries, like IT, for example? Would anyone like to answer that one? I think Peter, you've shown earlier, you work with several industries as well. So how has this affected other industries?
I think this is a question about, it's like asking whether it's a need or a want, right? I think you'll find that in most cases, if you look around, there is actually a change and a shift in the consumption. A lot of people say F&B is not doing well. Yes, that's true. But again, if you think about other aspect of F&B, the stores that are close to our home, they are very busy, all right, and they are also adapting. In the past, they will probably not be working with those food delivery services, but they actually tied up with them right now. A small little shop would have a machine that will be, spinning out orders for them, and they are very busy in the kitchen. So they are doing very well as well, right? So there's certainly a shift in terms of the consumption that we're seeing. So I think it's not generally true to say that all industries are not doing well. If we want to look into the segment of the industry, they are also trying to reinvent. They're also trying to pivot, all right, and to be able to do well. All right.
And I think, as Adi has mentioned, it's all about agility as well.
Exactly.
Being agile, right, in the beginning. Yeah, so I think that's one I'd like to ask Paulo, if you can answer this. Like, how about businesses that failed to prepare for the recession? Can anyone suggest ways to bail them out? If that's, yeah.
That's a tough question.
Question.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess as you can imagine, nobody saw this coming, right? I mean,
Yeah.
in your wildest projections, you wouldn't have guessed that COVID could come and bring everything to a standstill, right? Close down your offices, as mentioned, as Peter mentioned at the start, you suddenly have everybody working from home, right? You have to figure out how to do everything remotely, right? And everything, yeah, basically just shut down, right? So I think if you are a struggling business, I'm not sure it will help, but but you're not alone, right? I mean, it continues to be challenging for everybody. I think I guess the things that I can potentially suggest is, and again, ways that I saw our startups try to address the issues that they were facing is again look again, go back to the very basics, as it was mentioned earlier, and figure out, what is, how do you make sure that your business survives this difficult time, right? So start there. Understand what your cash flow needs are. I mean, if you need to raise, equity or debt, really look into that. But first have a good understanding of where your business is, and then again, talk to your partners, talk to your creditors, talk to your investors, and figure out what potentially you can do there, right? And try to figure that out. But the first thing is really understanding, your continuity again, and your cash flow situation, and figure that out. The second is with the resources that you do have, figure out what will make your business successful at this time, right? As Peter mentioned, there's some opportunities out there that you just don't see, right? That sometimes your business needs a little tweak here or there. If you address it, or you pivot in some way, that you can bring out the best in your business again, right? Again, it's not going to be easy. It's going to take some time, but yeah, it's really about looking internally first, and then externally, internally at your business first, and then externally at how you serve your market, how you serve your customers afterwards.
Thanks, Paulo. Yeah, I think this one goes to Adi, because you've also gone through a lot of tough times. During this pandemic, many SMEs are facing cash flow issue as sales continue to fail and to fall. As a result, many are afraid to make changes due to uncertainty. So in a situation like this, should sales be a priority before incorporating digital tools? Yeah, that's such an interesting question. Thanks, Nicholas.
Yeah, so I think there's another similar question that we had that I think I put in the answer queue by mistake, but very similar question that in this time, do we really invest on sales and revenue, or should we invest in productivity tools? See, I think the thing is, as I said earlier as well, there's no magic wand first up, right? It can't be that, hey, here is the magic formula that you're gonna take and suddenly things are gonna change, or it's not 100% sales and 0% productivity, or the other way around. It's not gonna be like that. The best idea, of course, is to be prepared beforehand, so that when you arrive in that kind of a situation, the productivity or the management side of things is already taken care of. But fast forwarding, let's say we've landed up in a situation where the pandemic has hit, or a recession has hit, and now you have to make that tough decision on, hey, what next? Do I really double down on sales and revenue generation, or do I start now focusing on cash flow management, etc.? I would say both are critical, and you need to take baby steps. If you have landed up in a situation, unfortunately, where you are not yet fully ready to have visibility, let's say, into your cash flows, or you don't yet have productivity to an extent that you would have wished it was, I would say that it's never too late. You start today. You should start investing small. You should start looking at a simple thing that you can always start doing is, and one of the things that smaller businesses often fail to do is, more and more conversations between business leaders and finance leaders. I think getting them in sync, those two teams in sync, is the first step that you can start with. And then over time, slowly start investing into the productivity tools. And yeah, of course, as Peter and Paulo both mentioned, life moves on, right? You can't, of course, totally shift towards not focusing on revenues. Those stay critical. And for those things around cash flow management, productivity enhancement, you need to start small whenever you can.
So to not be afraid to really talk about what matters, which is, of course, that cash flow even like regardless of the scenario. Yeah, I think Peter, if you would like to answer this, any case studies of like how a business that has undergone a digital transformation is faring better than its peer in the same industry?
Yeah. So earlier I shared one specific customer, and that was Unistar in the Philippines.
Mm,
And we also have seen a few more in other parts of the region. The customer is not referenceable, so I'm sorry I can't share that name
yeah,
out to
okay,
you.
that's okay.
But they invariably we're talking about the customers that are really in the services industry, where they are really providing some of these important critical healthcare kind of to the community, right? So they have actually requested for a lot more users to be provisioned so that they're able to provide some of these healthcare to be able to address the pandemic. But outside of this pandemic as well, we also seen a few cases whereby they, because of working from home, because the operation needs to be continued, and they are not able to get those resources where working from where they were used to be. They are also now looking at increased adoption of this system, because they found that this is really the way to go, all right, for moving forward for them. Yeah.
Thanks, Peter. Yes, and I think this one, let me just bring it back to Paulo. I think this one is for you. Some of the, like, have some of the portfolio companies in the lending space seen a rise in NPLs? Yeah, you'd like to answer this one for a bit, and then we go back to Peter. Yeah.
Yes, I guess just very quickly. Yes, I mean, obviously, given all the moratoriums and there definitely has been a rise in portfolio at risk and NPLs from our lending companies. And again, I guess just to point out here, a lot of our fintech companies, they support these underserved SMEs and underserved households, right, who are obviously having a very challenging or even sometimes more challenging time during this pandemic. So I guess we were trying to work with them on continue to support these customers and find ways to continue again to care about their own business, but also make sure to continue to engage their customers. But yeah, short answer, there definitely has been an increase in NPLs during this time.
Thanks, Paulo. Yes, and I think this one goes to Peter. What is the biggest inertia for businesses to transition from spreadsheet to CRM or ERP? So does the reluctance typically come from senior executives, middle management, or the operating level? And how do we convince them towards digital transformation?
I think it's a great question. This is something that I think there's no simple answer to that. It really depends on how the engagement process works. The senior executives sometimes have not been informed. They don't know enough of what digital transformation means, and I think it's important to also not assume that they understand what the challenges are, right? Until we have a conversation. I think this is really partnering, all right? It's not just about supplier and customer. This is a partnering. This is really about understanding what the challenges are and what the priorities are, and then where do we go from here, and how we are able to help you. I think this is really a teaming approach, basically. Whenever you go into digital transformation, it's really about teaming with your partners, with your business partners.
Which is actually interesting. Thanks, Peter, because we're sharing like the result from our final poll, and we see right here the primary business need of those in our audience. Any thoughts, Peter, about the results?
Yeah, I was already half expecting that some of these will be coming up. Particularly finance rank high up there, 16% across with a lot of the others. PSA, short professional services automation. This is an interesting one. I know it was going to be high up there, but they expect to come up right at the top. Maybe it's because of the fact that a lot of the members of the audience are from that space. Certainly, this is one area that is a growing area, particularly in Singapore and in the region where we're seeing that a lot of these are important to the economy. And we certainly, from Oracle NetSuite, this is one of our portfolio products, and we are able to help you out as well, right?
And Peter, you've already put your contact information right there. If anyone wants to start a conversation with you, you'd be more than happy to like walk them through.
Certainly.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. All right. So thank you so much for that one. And yes, I think we still have a few more minutes. I'd like to ask our dear panelists here, like final words. We've already mentioned like several strategies, right? If you could like give out best strategies for those who are struggling and they want to know how they can be resilient, what would your words be? So let me start with Paulo.
Yeah, I mean, I guess as my quick advice is, I mean, really have that honest assessment of your business and where it is currently, and then yeah, do what it takes to, do what it takes to get it out of the mud, and we'll get through this challenging environment. Just a matter of, figuring it out and working really hard to do so.
Thanks, Paulo. Adi?
I would say take a pause, identify your core competence, go back to that, and focus on making money.
Good advice. Yes. Okay. Peter?
Well, I think it is important to stay connected. I like to leave kind of like a few of these. I would call it as 5 C's. Being compassionate, obviously, cash flow, costs, really watch your costs very very carefully. The collaboration, and last but not least, go for the cloud solution.
All right. I think you want to share something, Peter. Yeah, let's just
Yeah,
pause
I
it.
will. I will share the last slide as well. Just it's actually very important from my perspective because I'm based out of Singapore. I believe a lot of the people from the audience are also based out of Singapore. I will not go on the left hand side. We already know what that is about. It's been talked about a lot. On the right hand side, I think it's important to know what's next. It is really, really about it's really about what is important right now. All right, I think digital transformation, without a doubt, we got to start it now. All right, reach out to me. Happy to help you in any way. Even after we have discussion and so on, you decide to postpone. I totally get it, but I think it's important to have that conversation now. I think it's important. I think the second part is really about the rise of cloud computing. I think this is really, really, if anything, I would say that this period of time is really, really like inertia, or it's a push to really get people jump started, to really go and explore what are some of the benefits if you go and go into the cloud computing. All right. And I think last but not least, I put it there as digital banking, but it's more than just that. There's virtual banking, there's payment services. We have seen this is really, really picking up, at a quick and a fast pace. And this is really where we are going to see out of this pandemic. This is going to be the way we are going to be, living our daily life, towards a cashless society, right? So that's all.
Thank you so much, Peter and Paulo, Adi, for your time today. And I hope our audience, I'm sure our audience has picked up a lot. Do let us know if you have any more questions. Feel free to reach out to us. For those that we have not answered yet, we'll get back to you to answer your questions. Please do connect with us in our social media pages to get the latest updates, startup news in the community, as well as opportunities. So thank you so much for your time, Peter, Adi, and Paulo, and I wish you all the best in your endeavors. And again, if you would like to reach out to Peter, and as he mentioned, right, to start that conversation doesn't have to go anywhere at the moment. I mean, it's okay also, but the important thing is to start that conversation. Feel free to reach him out at the email address that he shared with you. So thank you so much, everybody. I wish you all a great Tuesday afternoon.
Bye,
See you
everybody.
again next time. Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.